Hello, everybody. I'm Farmer Frank of the CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. Now I laugh at my own joke. While you download the app, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google, Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all blades of straw you can find in your neighborhood. Um, Yeah, part of what goes on this week is a discussion about what's going to happen next week. So, a lot of seeds were planted last week. Of course, my wonderful the super host here with me is, of course, David
Who is not
Morassutti.
a farmer by any stretch of
Who's
the
not a farmer. he's the wicked banker. He's playing the role of the wicked banker. So obviously, last week we had some games that set up this week in the sense of playoff previews, if you will, and or final opportunities to establish a position in the playoffs. Now, last week we watched the Toronto Argonauts, of course, not field their best unit. Right? Fair enough.
No, not at all.
So then we have the way the games have gone with, of course, here in the CFL last week. We had Toronto beat Edmonton 35-12. So to set up this week, that basically just allowed Toronto to survive another week of not getting a lot of injuries, which essentially is the game they're playing right now. Their game is playing for health. It was the last opportunity for Edmonton, the Elks, to establish some hope in the playoffs. Of course, that loss ended that.
Yeah, and the important thing right now for the Argos, if you're asking, if Argos fans are wondering what really is the plan of like these games, stay healthy and stay fresh, because there's kind of there's kind of a importance of, you could say, yeah, shut certain guys down, but it's always hard to ramp it back up afterwards. Like,
It's a
Ryan didn't
delicate balance.
we kind of mentioned that, what, Chad Kelly wasn't as sharp as he's usually been, and maybe that has something to do with the fact that he had the last game off, so he hadn't played in 2 weeks, right? And so that impacts a player who hasn't played a lot, right? So those are the delicate balances you need to work at.
I'm trying to remember now. I believe if we listened to what he said a few weeks ago, there were 2 games he wasn't going to play in. He hasn't not played in that game yet. That second game.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we can both agree, and I think it's historically proven, that you're not going to sit out your starting quarterback in the last game of the year, no matter how well you clinched or how long ago.
Yeah.
So he should be playing that last game.
You either play him the last game or you play him at least a quarter of the last game.
Yeah, because that thing about being fresh that you mentioned is clearly an important factor. He needs to get into a game so that, well, the other term would be you don't want him to be stale. So you don't want players to go stale. Sometimes, as much as physical protection, in other words, sitting a guy out for physical reasons, if they're healthy, it's a little more of a knife's edge. If they're not healthy, great. We don't have to play them because, on a scale of 1 to 10, health is primary. That you want the players to be healthy when they get back. So it's imperative that what they do, that balance, that delicate balance is about ensuring, like you said, and I agree with you 100%, staying fresh, but also recovering from any kind of injuries, and keeping in mind that even in recovering injuries, sitting out is not always a good idea either, because you can stiffen up or whatever. I'm not here as a doctor or a trainer, but those are obvious things. Those are the things that teams have to be aware of.
Yeah. It's a delicate balance that every team has to go through, right? Winnipeg all those years, and how many of those years had to figure out what Zach Collaros because not only give him rest, but he's also a quarterback that's had his injury concerns, right? So you have to think. Look, short term, it sucks for the fans, it sucks for ratings and things like that. But also explain to the fans and the team when your quarterback gets hurt because you're thinking too much about the short term and not the long term as well.
Yeah, and it's about giving reps, to, for example, in Kelly's case, to the backup quarterback, who may be necessary during the Grey Cup, as Kelly was as the backup last year for Bethel Thompson, had to come in and it helped that he played a little bit. Like he only had a couple of games under his belt in the Canadian Football League. So he needed those reps that he did before. I mean, let's face it. There's talent, and for some, is there enough talent without preparation or experience? I think it's accelerated by the experience, that talent. So that's why that's important.
Yeah, I mean, exactly, and that's kind of I think has been the driving force behind why you've seen Cameron Dukes so much the last couple of weeks. It's because you don't want Cameron Dukes coming into a game and not being able to handle that pressure. With that being said, I totally expect Cameron Dukes to probably play in this game on Saturday, even though Chad Kelly is named as the starter.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw last week, if I can change gears a little bit here, we saw Hamilton bring Bo Levi Mitchell in for the first quarter. And that first quarter was very important to them. He set the tone for the team in Saskatchewan, being Hamilton, of course, and he got them off to a quick start, and they built on that. But they didn't see the need of pursuing him going past the first quarter. Why? Because of recovering from an injury, not wanting to pressure his body into going from a stop to a run. They basically gave him a chance to jog a little bit, if you will. I'm just, I don't mean literally. I mean figuratively. They gave him a chance to jog, and he did really well. He had reason to be confident. His team had reason to be confident with him. Let's take him out. This is a good time to take him out, with our long-term concerns.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Especially on defense too. Like the Argos are banged up. They don't have the privilege that some of the other teams have had to have a bye week in this final stretch of the season. Right. So there's games and they've essentially said they've had to create their own bye weeks. That's
Right.
what this is really all about, creating kind of your
Totally.
own bye weeks in a lot of ways. So I don't have really an issue. It's smart planning, it's smart management. The Argos have true like look in when Ryan Dinwiddie first came on the scene. There's some critics about some of the decisions he's made, but that was expected with a guy who's never been in that role before. But guess what? He's grown and he's evolved. This is an evolved decision, and it's funny when Ryan Dinwiddie got some criticism for some of the decisions he made the last, in that game against Winnipeg. I don't think Mike O'Shea would be getting that same hint of criticism, or even a Dave Dickinson, or any of those other experienced coaches are getting that same call that Ryan Dinwiddie did from some of those who are in those markets. So I do think that it's an important distinction for people to remember that yes, Ryan Dinwiddie always talks about going 1-0 every week, but as a head coach of a team that has championship aspirations, he has to be the one that keeps that long term view in the forefront of everything.
I'll draw down a little bit on your comment that he has learned to be a coach, and he has every year that he's been the head coach, except for this year, he has done or made decisions that were overtly open to criticism. Right. This year is the first year that he hasn't done anything, hasn't made any overt errors, ones that you can point at and go, "Oh, there's the inexperience showing through." He's crossed, he's crossed that threshold of being a coach in learning to a veteran coach. He is now a veteran coach, and the decisions he makes, to some, I'll point out what you said, essentially what you were saying, and I'm going to put it a different way, and that is that The decisions that he's made that other coaches would have made can no longer be judged by his lack of experience. In fact, the opposite is true. It is because of his experience. And let's bear in mind, he's got a pretty good situation in as far as the support he has from upper management, meaning Pinball Clemens, and also the management that works under him. They're a very cohesive group, all the coaches. And you have news for us, and might as well slide this piece of news in with another signing from the management side by the Argos.
Yeah, and it's a collaborative effort, and like that, you know, where some CFL teams have decided to appoint a little more power to one person, the Argos have kind of gone in an opposite direction and really started to lean on the collaborative effort of the whole group and management, right? And I think that's so vital now, especially where, you know, one person might have a view, but if you can get other opposing views, a bunch of them, it gives you a chance to really reflect on if you're making the right decisions. It's always, I always say, like, you should always sometimes be willing to question some of the decisions you're making. Yeah, to a certain degree, you can't question every decision you make, but the important ones, you need that collaborative effort because somebody might be able to offer insight that you might not be thinking of.
Yeah, the theory that Pinball Clemens expressed his very first interview, and he continually talks about it. Over the years, he's come up with that saw that he likes, and that is he doesn't want to be the smartest guy in the room. And that holds true also for his head coach. He doesn't want to be the smartest guy in the room. And then even it goes down to the assistant coaches. They're very collaborative with their players. The players speak very highly of the coaches that they have, and they speak to the fact that many of them who in defense, talking about Mace, who just re-signed up with the Argos, he's going to be with the Argos for a while longer, have talked about the opportunity that Mace has given the defenders. They speak glowingly of him in the locker room, not speaking to us directly, not part of an interview. Just they want people to know. They want the media to know. They literally, when we're walking by, are saying, Mace is our guy. It's kind of, I know it's because they're winning. Okay. You can be really nice because you're winning. But one thing I can tell you is there was a time when there were issues on the sidelines with the Argos in the way that they played, and it never degenerated into coaches hearing anything about from the coaches or the players towards the coaches. It really was an in-house personality thing on the sideline that they've worked on, and with the leadership of Pinball Clemens, they have done a great job of removing some of the more uh, more difficult players who had difficulty pulling on the rope or rowing at the same time with everybody else, if I can use an argot term. They have identified who those players are, and they've been, they unceremoniously, no big deal. All of a sudden, they're not on the team, and people have, you and I have kind of scratched our heads on a couple, but when we look at the long history, in other words, the past few years, they all made sense in my mind, and that's one of the reasons that the Argos and teams like Winnipeg. Sometimes we talk about trades that aren't made that are important. We also should be talking about trades or releases that are made for the ongoing good that may not look like they're protecting the talent they have on the team. Sometimes it seems almost though as they're shunting the talent on the team, and yet it turns out long-term wise, you have teams like Winnipeg that have a happy ship, and the Argos are in flight group. So if I'll use two opposite terms to describe what they do, so that it's important. And at this stage in the season, a lot of what they got to do is protect health wise, like we've talked about. There's also the emotional side that needs to be protected, which takes us back to teams like Edmonton, who are now done, Hamilton, who are trying to build something. If I can ask you, what, how, how is Hamilton? If you agree with me that Hamilton is improved a lot in the past few weeks, what can you point at specifically, or more than one thing, whatever it is you feel that's made Hamilton a better team. Without we can talk about the obvious of if Bo Levi Mitchell's healthy and he plays the way he did in that one
I
quarter, yada yada
both
yada.
quarterbacks being healthy, but I also just think that there's confidence. Like the one of the few games that they have lost in this stretch was to the Argos, and it wasn't even close, right? Like,
Right.
I think it's important to have a little bit of perspective in that the games that they've been winning since this turnover, right? Ottawa twice, Edmonton, um, I think Ottawa again. Like their more impressive win came against Winnipeg, BC, right?
Saskatchewan.
In Saskatchewan, right? Saskatchewan's been going in the other direction the last little while, but like the games they lost, the two to the Argos, I still think still kind of speak to that they're improving, but have they improved enough to get to that next level? Like I think they're getting there. I think the confidence is returning. I think this game against the Lions tonight, that's the litmus test for me. Because guess what? The Lions have something to play for.
Mm-hmm.
First, the West is still up for grabs for them. For Hamilton, second is still up for grabs. If I'm Montreal, I am concerned because for a second there you're thinking, the second place game shouldn't be too. It's gonna be tough, but not as tough as we think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we've had this advantage over Hamilton for so long. Right? They were 3-6. Let's not forget. Now they're back to being a 500 team. I think the important thing to remember here, though, if you're Montreal, is this is a veteran group in Hamilton. Sometimes you find that spark at the right time, and you get that confidence. You can just run with it. So, like if Hamilton beats the Lions tonight, and let's say Montreal is in that position now where they lose to Edmonton. That final game, in a lot of ways, kind of is not a good situation for Montreal because they would like to have second place all wrapped up, so that in that final game against Hamilton, all right, we're not going to play certain players because we don't want to give up the game plan.
Right.
And
So there's that delicate balance again, where you want to tip your hand, but the temptation of not losing, which is important, right? Not losing, which is almost as important as that delicate. It weighs on the scales of that delicate balance, finishing first and not having to play that 2 and 3 game, right? That's really important. And the big thing here is, for me, part of the reason why Hamilton was not successful against the Toronto Argonauts is they could not put together a running game. If we remember a few weeks ago when Butler played against his former team, BC, oh, I don't care about this game. This game doesn't really mean that nothing. It's just another game. And then the end of the game, he does an interview, says, well, I guess people looked in my eyes and they saw I wanted to win this game. I'm paraphrasing, but I'm being accurate. So this is another game for Butler. It's not the first time he's playing them. This is something that they're going to do again. And really, as much as Bo Levi Mitchell is important, as much as Schultz's great play is important, and they both are, the real key to Hamilton proving that they can beat Montreal, a good defense against the run, is establishing the run game in, game out. They've done it sporadically. In fact, they didn't do it at all at the beginning, from the beginning stretch, the first, 10 games, they didn't establish that. So now all of a sudden, there's been a hint that they have a running game. And I think, David, that's the thing that they're going to have to establish against BC. You talk about confidence. I think they need a good running game because that's where their confidence isn't consistent, right? So, as much as it is with the quarterbacking, of course, but it's a key component to winning football games.
It is such a key component, and Hamilton was being guilty of being trying to be a one-dimensional offense, which we know in the CFL you can't be one-dimensional. If you want to be, you can get by. You can become a playoff team by being a one-dimensional team. But if you want to be a truly good contending team, you can't be a one-dimensional offense. You really need all phases, and really all phases of your team need to go right.
Absolutely.
But I think especially when you're looking at that that rushing game, that running attack, you need it, right? You need to take pressure off of Bo Levi Mitchell and Matthew Schultz, right? Give them make the defenses actually respect the run so that they're not just dropping back everybody in pass coverage, right?
Yep.
So I do think for Hamilton, I do want to see that really competitive team that's going to push Toronto, right, in that East final, because for Toronto's benefit, you want that test when you're going into the when you're going into the Grey Cup potentially if you get there, right? So I think for Montreal, I think this is kind of needed too, right? You don't want things to be too easy on you. You want to have
No.
a little bit of a challenge. You want to have, and I guarantee Jason Moss, yeah, sometimes you like things to be easy, but at the same time, it's a good motivator for his group to come out with the effort that they want, right? They don't have to say,
Prove they can win when it matters.
not much really to play for, so we're not going to go all out. No, now they're going to have to go. They can't just sit back and in a lot of ways.
It's funny that saying, oh geez, it just blew out of my head. How history change, how things change, but they seem to remain the same. When I look at Hamilton and their quarterback situation, it's the same thing it was a few years ago. Simone, we had Mazzoli was injured, so Evans had to come in and back up. We have Bo Levi Mitchell was injured, so now we have Schultz backing up, and in both those cases, the backups have looked good. Now, admittedly, later, this is where that change can happen on Hamilton's behalf. Either Bo Levi Mitchell stays healthy, which they didn't have the situation with Mazzoli, and B, Evans, who when the crunch came in, he couldn't push the team over the edge. That's another test for Schultz, right? So as much as I talk about the running game, the reason I say the running game, because it was a failure the beginning of the season. They had the same guys, they just couldn't make it work. In the case of the quarterbacks, this is an opportunity they haven't had all year. So that's why I was keying on the running game. So now what's going to happen is, can those two quarterbacks, between the two of them, find a way to win going out this season? That's going to be the key, I think, that will make Hamilton different than they were the last time the Grey Cup was in Hamilton.
Yeah, there's the ultimate motivation right there. Like you can tell Hamilton's trying their best to not let this season be a total disappointment. I give them credit because I wasn't sure if they were even going to make the playoffs. Right?
Absolutely. I felt they could,
I
but
credit
that's
their resolve. I credit in a lot of ways the coaching staff for keeping them in it as much as possible.
And in the last game, Milanovic had personal issues, so he wasn't the offensive coordinator. And if one believes that the better offensive coordinator is him, then they kind of hid what they were doing by virtue of the the coordinator not being involved in that game. So now he's going to be back, I assume. So now that his offensive coordination is going to be again exercised, and we'll see how well it works with the squad that he has, the running back he has, whatever quarterback they put forward, and how the team plays offensively. We know that Hamilton can be a big threat defensively, so this game against BC is important to BC and Hamilton. I think this is one of the games between teams that are in the playoffs getting a chance to establish what they'll be like or trend going into the playoffs.
Oh, and that's so crucial, right? You need to have that. You need to have the. You need to have that going into the playoffs always. You can't think to yourself that things are going to be easy, right? You're going to have those moments, but yeah, I think for the coaching staff in Hamilton, there were some bumps along the road, but it's a chance to figure things out. It's a chance to until you're officially eliminated, you still have a chance. That gives you every reason to really try to get back on track.
That's a great segue. Beautiful segue. I don't know if you planned it, but good job. I really enjoy this segue because last week Montreal beat beat Ottawa, end of story. Montreal established that they're a strong team. But the game that mattered was Saskatchewan against Hamilton. While they were playing, Calgary, with a game in hand, was sitting back watching Saskatchewan lose and offer hope. And this is the beauty of the Canadian Football League. And, because there are not that many teams in the league, it's difficult to leapfrog into a position where you can improve your position because there's so few teams. So now they sat on the sidelines, watched Saskatchewan lose. They get to play Saskatchewan again. And this time they play Saskatchewan with a real opportunity to put themselves in a position where that extra game could tie them for the season. And then they will have the tiebreaker, because that game they played in week 6, where Saskatchewan came in at 4-1 and Calgary came in at 1-3. Now all of a sudden, many weeks later, they're going to play each other again for the final time for the right to have that leg up on who makes the playoffs. Because if they're tied, one of the tiebreakers is your record against the opponent you're tied with.
Yeah, I mean, Calgary's been in win now mode forever. So, I mean,
Can they
Saskatchewan
do it?
losing 5 in a row. It's like, who wants that damn spot, right? And so, I think with Calgary, I think with Saskatchewan, like you just know that you got to put all your focus and effort just ending that doubt, getting rid of any of that desire of debate of whether they can actually clinch a playoff spot. Like they get that chance right here, right like this week.
Clinch
Beat
it.
Calgary, you're in. Like it's simple for them. For Calgary, like I mean, they're yeah, as you said, they're still alive, but a lot of what they're undoing from the start of the year has now put them in a position where it's like we have a chance, but it's still not fully certain because we need also a last week victory by Toronto at a time where they're not really expecting to try to win those games because they're not going to be. That's not what they want to do, right? They're just try. Well, they want to win, but they
Their
don't want.
priorities are
Priorities are much different,
convoluted.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you're Calgary, you're just like, yeah, we got a chance, but it's also not a great chance because of how how the final week shapes out for you, right? So it's going to be an interesting game. I want to see, does Saskatchewan get that mentality back, right? Like they've looked so. I'm trying not to use a strong word because Saskatchewan fans have used very strong words lately about how that team has been playing. It hasn't been good enough. I
Dump the coach.
mean, right? Like this is the type of season where you know what? Even though they might make the playoffs, I think jobs are on the line here.
Yeah, and the head coach is on shaky ground. Dickinson's a nice guy. He's a very
Yeah,
a friend of the show. He does. He has a great personality. The unfortunate thing is, the personality doesn't matter. It's results. The CFL has to be results based. Every team, makes decisions based on winning and losing. So um, there was talk of getting rid of him before this game, like literally firing the coach and let's go a different direction. If they don't win against Calgary, that decision's going to cause, because right now there's all that pent up fire, right? And I don't like the idea of him being basically hung out to dry before this game, because that gives an excuse to the players, to whom are, the Saskatchewan players are as responsible for winning and losing as the coach.
Yeah.
They have some responsibility too. And with the kind of talk that's going on, it's kind of letting them off the hook, and they shouldn't be off the hook.
No, not at all. And I don't. And really, if they think it's just the coach that's the problem, also look at the guy who put the team together in a way, right?
Yikes.
I think you got to look top down. Like for Saskatchewan, like this is not one year that this has happened. This is this has been a culminative issue, right? You get rid of a quarterback you thought wasn't good enough to lead your offense. He's got himself a playoff spot right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it doesn't look good when you make change and then the change you make doesn't really work out, and you're seeing that maybe the change you made might have been a little too hasty in a lot of ways. So it's yeah, I don't know. I don't know what what the answer here for Saskatchewan is if they lose. Like, it's probably likely going to become down to jobs being lost, but how far do you go, right? How far do you go, and how much loyalty? That's the other thing too, is how much loyalty is there with those in charge and in decision making situations? Because in a lot of ways that plays a factor too. Also, we have to talk about the coaching cap. How does that impact decisions as well? We don't really know for sure, but I would strongly suggest that maybe that Saskatchewan might be able to do what they need to do. Although the pool gets a lot tougher. There aren't a lot of ready-made. There are some coaches I could see potentially, you know, if Saskatchewan loses out, does Scott Milanovich want to be a head coach again in the CFL? He
He
showed
was he was
interest.
going west to Edmonton, and then that
That
COVID
fell
ended
through,
that.
but would a chance of reuniting with the Trevor Harris be of interest to him?
To that point, to the name Trevor Harris, I mentioned that in week 6, Saskatchewan was 4-1, Calgary was 1-3. The quarterback who started that game was Trevor Harris.
Mhm.
He was injured in that game, in a game where Saskatchewan scored with a couple of minutes left in the game to take the lead, and then with literally seconds left in the game, Calgary gets a walk-off field goal to win the game. So, the reason I mention all that is because these two teams will reflect on that, and they haven't done it overtly, but Trevor Harris might be coming back. He could become the job saver for many players and the coaching staff, and as you pointed out, the GM. If Trevor Harris gets healthy for the playoffs, do you want to be the loser of who gets first between Winnipeg and BC to
Mhm.
play a Trevor Harris led Saskatchewan Roughrider team with some of the best receivers in the Canadian Football League? So, this season isn't over for Saskatchewan. There's no lock on they're going to have a great end to their season, but there are opportunities here because the Canadian Football League relies so heavily on their quarterbacks. The difference between Saskatchewan with Dolagala and Trevor Harris, I'm sorry, David. I like what Dolagala has done, but it has been only a guy who's been a placeholder. The best you could hope from him is not to lose a game, unfortunately.
Well, look at also what's happened the last 5 games. They've all ended in losses. There's no easier and again, we don't know what Trevor Harris's status is. We don't know if he's anywhere close. But I do think that when you're in a situation that Saskatchewan's in, some say, "Oh, you got nothing to lose." Ah, you got a lot to lose here, right?
A lot.
Now, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think Jim Barker was on the Rod Peterson show and kind of said that he doesn't expect Trevor Harris to be back. Right? We don't know
At all?
at all. He's saying that
Okay.
he doesn't think he's gonna be back at all. If that's the case,
Oh
obviously got
boy.
no choice than go Dolagala. I think he's the right. But I'm also of the belief that you know this is also a situation where you get to learn about what you truly have in Jake Dolagala, because Trevor Harris might not want to come back next year. He might want to go somewhere else if he feels like that's an option as well. So, yeah,
Well,
Saskatchewan.
he's done that a couple of times, so
Yeah, but you know what? Like at this point in the CFL season, I do like that there are games that do mean something. They might not mean as much to some, but these are games that still mean something. You need those.
yeah, week 19 has some interesting games to say the least. And BC at Hamilton, we've talked about a little bit. Saskatchewan at Calgary, I think we've talked into detail. If there are any final words in regards to that game, I'll say my final words on that game is which team's going to show up on both sides of the equation.
Yeah, that's really it.
So
Like
that's what you got there. Montreal is up against Edmonton. Edmonton, all they got left is to play for jobs. Montreal has second place in mind. So, this is one of those games where, again, a team that wants to get in the playoffs has to decide how important this game is in regards to how they go into the playoffs and who they play against and where.
Yeah, I mean, nothing is set in. Really, only one spot set in stone in terms of a playoff position. Teams have made the playoffs, but I don't see any positions handed out. So, if I'm the coaching staff, I'm telling every guy, we still got lots to play for. Still got lots
Last
to
year,
play for.
sorry.
No, and I think these games. That's why I said these games are going to be interesting, because where there's going to be a little bit of pressure, right, on these teams to perform, will these teams actually be able to perform? Like if you're Edmonton, yeah, you got dealt a tough blow because your playoffs are done. But you know what? What's even better? Getting satisfaction of beating a team and putting them in a tough position. Yeah, Montreal's made the playoffs, but if you can say we're gonna make, if Montreal ends up losing and finishes in third and they don't go on to the East Final, Edmonton can be like, we played a part in that, and that's satisfaction as well in that regard too.
Yeah, you know what? The thing here is also the mental aspect of a game like this, where you have Edmonton not as concerned about playing as a team, more concerned about playing for next year's contract. So, the unity aspect of the game, as far as the team is concerned, I think is the biggest coach's challenge for Edmonton. But if players establish that that how good they are, that's great. That's something that can help you in the off season and making some decisions, because this is like an exhibition game for them. It truly is. It's just like an exhibition game. This is where now you get a chance to identify players that maybe should be continuing as members of the organization, or it's time to move on players, which in a way is an unfair situation because the game doesn't mean that much. The motivation to play is something that it enhances the situation. With Montreal and Ottawa, Toronto and Ottawa, that game very quickly, David. Ottawa, again, this is another team that's not in the playoffs that needs to establish, can they be part of the future? Last year, Ottawa, I think, won this game against Toronto, showed that they had a quarterback that maybe this guy Evans looked really, remember? Yeah, I think it was Deontay Evans. I think he looked really good in that game, if I remember correctly. And this is another opportunity to do that. But that doesn't go far for the fans. I think the Ottawa fans now are looking at this game not as anything other than a game they're watching because it's their team, and they just want to see if there's any hope there. That's what this game is for the fans. For the Argo fans, it's okay. Let's remember we got a playoff game to play too. Because Argo fans, fans who are in the playoffs aren't stupid. They know that, again, we talked about it before, but we didn't talk about it from the fans' perspective. Fans do understand the politics of playing your best players and not playing your best players. They may or may not like it at home because it's the game that they're watching. But the Argos have 2 more games on the road that they can exercise their right to field the team they wish to, for whatever reason they decide to.
Yeah, and I think for Ottawa, they're going back to Dustin Crum again. These next few games are for them to see is, can they get this guy to be something for them, right? He had a good start. I think teams eventually started to figure him out a little bit, but this is his opportunity. You're talking about playing for jobs. This is what he is playing for. He didn't have a good audition last week. If I'm being honest with you, that game against Hamilton, or sorry, Montreal, he scored 3 points as an offense. Like let's as you said, you know what, you might lose games. Let's not lose games how we lost the games last year, where fans were just sick and tired of watching the games. If you're going to lose a game, lose with some competitiveness to it. Lose knowing that you went down to the wire with teams. Show your fans that, you know what, we might not be competitive this year, but we have some hope for the future to come. Again, that should be motivation enough, but I don't know if that's going to be enough, because when a season's lost in some regards.
Yeah, Ottawa has their biggest problem in my mind has been that Crum came out the first couple of games and looked really good, and then they went into the quarterback room after losing a game and have not come back with a counter to the fact that they lost the game against Crum. The adjustments out of that quarterback room, and I specifically refer to the quarterback room because it's not just the quarterback; it's the coaching as well, right? He hasn't been insulated and hasn't been put in a position to win, or he can't. I'm not sure which, and I think both could be true. So this game that he's going to play now is we're going to see if the research and or the what the teams do to prepare for opposing quarterbacks. Can Ottawa have a countermeasure against the defense of the Toronto Argonauts? That's the key here, and as far as the quarterback is concerned. So it'll be a game for the home team fans to watch. They'll be watching it with trepidation because they want to make sure their team is healthy, and that's what the organization wants. That's what the coach wants. So that's going to be the key factor there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, I'm hoping the issue with going to some of these games now is just like they've been they've lacked a little bit of luster, right? Who thought that finishing with your playoffs wrapped up like a couple weeks ago is going to make things a little lackluster. But I think right now, if I'm the Argos, you know, this you got to tell your guys, job's not done here. We're not the job. The CFL season doesn't end on October 13th or 14th for the game. The season ends when we're in the final game of the year.
Yeah,
And
when they're
for
playing that
Ottawa,
playoff.
in a way too, for Ottawa, the motivation is, we're not in the playoffs, but you're still being paid every game you play. Go earn that paycheck.
And maybe it'll get you another one.
Exactly.
And that's the key. Well, we got a couple of minutes left. I guess if we want to spend a minute with looking towards the Grey Cup, we were reminded the Grey Cup is coming. We both have been invited to go to the Grey Cup game. I look forward to going. The excitement in Hamilton, I think the Grey Cup in Hamilton, with the team showing a lot more hope than they had originally, will help, I think, in the sales of tickets, which is important. I think also it will help with the commitment of the community to make it the best experience possible. In other words, the Grey Cup Festival. And a game against Montreal in the semifinals, the Eastern Division, will enhance the preparation for the Grey Cup game. I look forward to that. Hamilton, for a different reason, was cheated for an opportunity to have a great Grey Cup Festival because of the pandemic. Here's hoping that Hamilton gets a chance to put their best foot forward, motivated to make it as much fun as possible. The league has done some great things with great music, not only in halftime, but now even during the week. So the league is doing their part. The teams that'll show up there, we know, will do their part, as they do every year, it seems, recently especially, games ending in the last second. We can look forward to a great football game, and I don't think it matters which of the playoff teams gets in. I think it'll be a fantastic game as usual. So here's hoping that the experience that Hamilton fans have is a better one, and also the fans that come in from outside Hamilton to come watch the Grey Cup.
I think what also will help, hopefully, is having the game a little earlier too.
1 week. Yep.
Well, not having it in early December, it can have a difference, but I do think also having the full experience is going to be crucial, because they just haven't had that. They didn't have that the last time, so I'm certainly looking forward to it. I think Hamilton's was deserving of having a better Grey Cup experience. I think the fans definitely deserve it too. I think the city deserves it. So I'm glad that they're able to get that now. I'm hoping that two things. One, the game the game is good and the weather doesn't become a doesn't become a factor, right? It's it's always a challenge here when you have especially an outdoors, well, only one indoor stadium in the whole league, right? So weather becomes
When
a
you
factor.
have a game in Hamilton where wind and rain can be a factor,
Yeah.
but that's football. It's an outdoor game, and it is what it is. So again, we've skipped the playoff games, and I guess to review, we have BC or Winnipeg against Calgary or Saskatchewan, and all those options. There's so much that's going to be a lot of fun, regardless of which way that all plays out, because either way, you're going to have an underdog against the team that doesn't make it to first, and so it's going to be a very interesting playoff in the West, and in the East you have teams that are playing much better, and I would dare say that it doesn't matter which team wins, whether it's Hamilton or Montreal, doesn't matter where. Either way, they're going to be a great opponent for the Argos. So we're looking forward to a great playoff in the Canadian Football League.
Yeah, the playoffs are when the best come out to shine, right? You bring your best in the playoffs, and I'm just really hoping though in the next few weeks teams don't think that we need to hold back too much. You got to get used, because I've seen some playoff games that have been some real like it was almost like a grinded out because teams were rusty, players were rusty, and players just had to get back up to speed once they were knocked down a peg or two. So I hope that's not going to happen this time around.
I don't think so, because it's going to be a potpourri of emotions that make the playoffs. We've got everything from BC or Winnipeg, whichever team doesn't get first. Are they going to be angry that they didn't get first? And are they going to be they're going to be piss and vinegar on the field for sure. For sure, they're going to be like that. In the eastern side, you've got two teams that really, in their playoff, that have something to prove, that they know they can do it. At least Hamilton's on the cusp. We know Montreal is clearly in a position to believe that they can do well in the playoffs, and they're reinforcing that by playing well when they need to. They proved it against Ottawa. They gave Ottawa no hope whatsoever to win that game. They were Montreal was very disciplined, and they were very disciplined. They stayed away from penalties. They played the kind of game that you need to play in all three phases. They did a masterful job of playing really well. Now they just have to do it against the team that's in their way to get to the Eastern Final.
No, it's true.
So it's going to be really interesting. And these last few games, like you said, I agree 100%. Hopefully the teams that don't, the teams that aren't in the playoffs, hopefully they can show us that they belong in the league. And by they, I mean the teams belong in the league, because right now, we have Edmonton is a team that played terribly at the beginning of the year, and they paid the price. We have Ottawa, who has not improved. They're the same team that came out of the gate, sadly. And I don't know if their coaching staff is going to survive in the off season, because improvement is important. Either that or the GM is going to, next year the GM is going to be called under question, and the coach. So, we have a lot of reasons why teams should try to play well
Oh no, definitely for sure.
and earn that ticket from the fans. But I'm sure, and I hope you all are as entertained as I think you will be in the coming weeks. It's been a fun ride so far. We've had the privilege, David and I, in covering a team that's had one of the best seasons they've ever had. One of the best seasons they've ever had. But it'll be meaningless, David, if they don't get to the Grey Cup.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks for doing this, David.
Thank you, Frank.
For David Morassutti, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk here on Mondays at 9 p.m. Today, a different day. We couldn't make it a holiday. The show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL Talk news, entertainment, and sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. And don't forget Candid Frank Stanisci, 10:30 on YouTube. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Candid Frank. Until next time.